to James and Andrew and the rest of us. I remember at the time thinking, this is so strange, yet wonderful. And then I thought, I doubt anybody's going to say anything right now. I was wrong. You know who broke the silence. Peter.
No way you're going to wash our feet. I mean, that's what I told him. He could wash other people's feet, but he wasn't going to wash mine. I looked at him and I said, Jesus, you're not going to wash our feet. I mean, you're the king. And he looked at me and he said, well, then you can have nothing to do with me. And I'm like, ouch. Okay, wash my feet, wash my hands, wash my whole body if you have to. He looked at me and said, no, your feet will be fine, Peter. In the midst of him washing our feet, he teaches us servanthood.
Then Jesus took some bread and some wine. He blessed it and he served it to us. He said it was a new covenant with his blood. And he said, tonight, all of you will lose faith in me. I remember thinking right then, lose faith in you? Never. But I didn't say anything. I just sat there.
I couldn't just sit there. I had to say something, so I looked at him and I said, Jesus, I love you. You can count on me. Everybody else may fall away, but I will not. You can count on me. He looked at me and he smiled. He said, Peter, you'll deny me 3 times for tomorrow morning. Ouch. The next thing I knew, we were wrapping things up and we were headed to the garden to pray.
Lord, don't hold back your tender mercies from me. Let your unfailing love and faithfulness always protect me. For troubles surround me, too many to count. My sins pile up so high, I can't see my way out. They outnumber the hairs on my head. I have lost all courage. Please, Lord, rescue me. Come quickly, Lord, and help me. May those who try to destroy me be humiliated and put to shame. May those who take delight in my trouble be turned back in disgrace. As for me, since I am poor and needy, let the Lord keep me in his thoughts. You are my helper and my Savior. Oh my God, do not delay.
The pain didn't stop. No matter what he did, Judas could barely lift himself off the ground. It was as if a tremendous weight was sitting on his chest. He felt like he could barely breathe. He leaned against the door of the house of Caiaphas. His hands felt like they weighed 100 pounds each. When he knocked on the door, the ache from his knuckles passed through his body and he nearly collapsed. The door opened, and Judas could tell by the way the servant stared at him that he must have looked as bad as he felt. Judas was led through a hall. The servant constantly had to stop and wait for Judas to catch up. The servant took him to a room where the chief priest sat on the floor around a table. Judas didn't even recognize the voice that came out of his own mouth. What will you give me if I bring Jesus to you? They whispered to each other. It didn't take them a full minute. The oldest of the priests stood and counted out 30 pieces of silver into Judas's hands. In spite of the cold he felt in his skin, the coins were so hot, he thought surely they would brand his palms. When he stepped out into the night, he took a deep breath, filled his lungs with air. It was the first deep breath he'd taken since he'd made his decision. He stood upright, and the pain in his chest and his bones were gone. The throbbing in his head had subsided, but the coins still felt hot in his hands. He dumped them into a small leather pouch and tied it to his belt. He couldn't help hearing the coins jingle when he started walking down the dark road. It was an annoyance at first, but soon he was able to ignore it.
Save me, O God, for the floodwaters are up to my neck. Deeper and deeper I sink into the mire. I can't find a foothold. I'm in deep water and the floods overwhelm me. I am exhausted from crying for help. My throat is parched. My eyes are swollen with weeping, waiting for my God to help me. Those who hate me without cause outnumber the hairs on my head. Many enemies try to destroy me with lies, demanding that I give back what I didn't steal. Oh God, you know how foolish I am. My sins cannot be hidden from you. Don't let those who trust in you be ashamed because of me, O sovereign Lord of heaven's armies. Don't let me cause them to be humiliated, O God of Israel. For I endure insults for your sake. Humiliation is written all over my face. Even my own brothers pretend they don't know me. They treat me like a stranger. But I keep praying to you, Lord, hoping this time you will show me favor. In your unfailing love, O God, answer my prayer with your sure salvation. Rescue me from the mud. Don't let me sink any deeper. Save me from those who hate me and pull me from these deep waters. Don't let the floods overwhelm me, or the deep waters swallow me, or the pit of death devour me. Answer my prayers, O Lord, for your unfailing love is wonderful. Take care of me, for your mercy is so plentiful. Don't hide from your servant. Answer me quickly, for I am in deep trouble. Come and redeem me, free from my enemies.
So Peter was the one they called the rock. He was the strong one. He was the one who all the others leaned on when they began to question their beliefs. But on this night when Jesus put his hands on Peter's shoulders, there was pain in the Messiah's eyes. He was hurt. His face had become heavy and no longer looked like he'd be able to smile again. Peter, he said, Peter, tonight you would deny me 3 times that you even know me. Peter's first response was that of disbelief. He knew that there's no way that he would deny his friend. But then he saw the Savior's eyes. He knew it was true. He knew. Peter's face then looked determined. He would prove him wrong. He would hide. He would go someplace where there were no people. He couldn't betray someone if there was no one to talk to, right?
Oh God, whom I praise, don't stand silent and aloof. While the wicked slander me and tell me lies about me, they surround me with hateful words and fight against me for no reason. I love them, but they try to destroy me with accusations, and even as I'm praying for them, they repay evil for good and hatred for my love. Help me, O Lord my God, save me because of your unfailing love. Let them see that this is your doing, that you yourself have done it, Lord. Then let them curse me if they like, but you will bless me. When they attack me, they will be disgraced, but I, your servant, will go right on rejoicing. May my accusers be clothed with disgrace. May their humiliation cover them like a cloak. But I will give repeated thanks to the Lord, praising him to everyone, for he stands beside the needy, ready to save them from those who have condemned them.
In the garden, Jesus told his friends to sit and wait for him while he prayed. He walked just a few yards away before falling to his knees. He leaned against a large stone and pressed his tired face on the surface. The night air had become cool, and so was the stone. The sweat on his face and his hands began to chill him. Finally, Jesus lifted himself on his knees and pressed his hands together so tightly that his knuckles turned white. "Father," he said, "if it is possible, I don't want to die this way. But if you want me to, I will." Jesus closed his eyes. He prayed so hard that blood began to seep from the pores of his skin and fall to the ground like thick clots of mud.
once we got to the garden, it just got crazy. Jesus asked Peter, James, and myself to go further in the garden with him and pray, and we did. We tried. We kept falling asleep. Jesus kept waking us up. I remember one time he said, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. That's true. It's all a blur. And I think this whole mess got started because of Judas. Did he really think what he was doing was right?
There he is. He's the one you want, the one praying by himself. Now the others, they will come up and try to create some scene. But the one that I kiss on the cheek, that's the one you want. Now 30 pieces of silver, right? That's what we agreed upon? 30 pieces. Forget about the rest. The one that I kiss on the cheek, that's the one you want.
A kiss? Judas betrays Jesus with the kiss of a friend? And then it got crazy. Peter grabs a sword and he cuts off this guy's ear. And Jesus just reached down and picked it up and put it right back on the guy's head, as if nothing had happened. And then they took him. I'd love to tell you that we fought for him, but we didn't. Everyone ran. I ran. I'm so ashamed.
What have I done? What have I done? Was I so stupid to think that I've killed him? I've killed him. I've crucified Jesus.
Luke 22:44 says of Jesus, "And being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground." The sweat was unusually intense because his emotional state was unusually intense. Dehydration coupled with exhaustion further weakened him. And it was in this condition that Jesus faced the first physical abuse. Punches and slaps to the face and head while blindfolded. Unable to anticipate the blows, Jesus was badly bruised, his mouth and eyes injured. The psychological effects of the false trials should not be underestimated. Consider that Jesus faced them bruised, dehydrated, exhausted, and possibly in shock. And in the previous 12 hours, Jesus had suffered emotional trauma, rejection by his closest friends, a cruel beating, and a sleepless night during which he had to walk miles between unjust hearings. And despite this, he must face these trials and these beatings. He was in no way prepared for the punishment of the flogging. The effects would be worse than anything he had faced so far. A man to be flogged was stripped of his clothes and his hands tied to a post above his head. And he was then whipped across the shoulders, back, buttocks, thigh, and legs. The soldier standing behind and to one side of the victim. And the whip used, a flagellum, was designed to make this as devastating as possible, bringing the victim close to death. Several short, heavy leather thongs with balls of lead and iron and bone attached near the end of each. As the scourging proceeds, the heavy leather thongs begin and produce superficial cuts, and then deeper damage to underlying tissues. Bleeding becomes severe when not only capillaries and veins are cut, but also arteries and the underlying muscles. The small metal balls first produce large, deep bruises which are broken open by further blows. The fragments of sheep's bone rip the flesh as the whip is drawn back. And when the beating is finished, the skin of the back is in ribbons, and the entire area torn and bleeding. The words chosen by the gospel writers suggest that the scourging of Jesus was particularly severe. He was certainly at the point of collapse when he was cut down from the flogging post. Jesus was allowed no time to recover before facing his next ordeal. Made to stand, he was dressed in a robe by jeering soldiers, crowned with a twisted band of thorny crowns. And these crowns, these thorns were from an acacia tree. And if you've seen the locust trees here in Kansas, they are a relative tree of acacia trees. So the honey locust and those thorns, those are the types of thorns that were made into the crown of thorns that Jesus had on his head. And they placed it on his head, and they hit that crown down onto his head to make sure it stayed. And this robe went onto his back, which was in shreds from the flogging, and it would stick to the wounds as the blood dried, and when they pulled it away later, it would only cause further damage. And it was in this condition they told him to carry his cross to Golgotha. And obviously he was too weak to carry that cross. And a man named Simon the Cyrene, he picked it up and was assigned to carry it for Jesus to the cross where he would die. As he was nailed to the cross, the nails went through his bones in his feet and into the bones, between the bones on his wrists to hold him up there. And it's not those wounds that cause death on a cross, it's asphyxiation. You cannot breathe because of the weight being borne down. And in order to breathe, you would have to press down on the nails in your ankles and in your wrists to lift up in order to open your lungs enough to get air to enter your lungs to breathe. And as he hung on the cross, the sun went dark, the veil was torn from top to bottom, and Jesus died. Many factors contributed to his death. A combination of shock and suffocation killed most victims, but in Jesus' case, it was acute heart failure, most likely. And this is suggested by his sudden death following a loud cry after only a few hours. After he was already dead, the executioners broke the legs of the other criminals, but in order to fulfill the prophecy, they noticed he was already dead and didn't need to have his legs broken in order to rush his death. He was already gone. And so they pierced his side with a spear just to be sure, and blood and water poured from the wound. It went up underneath his ribs and into the pericardium and opened up that cavity around your heart where fluid had built up, and that poured out from his wound to the ground. All of this was for you and for me. The price for our sin was paid by his death in our place.
John 19, 10 through 12 says this. So Pilate said to him, "You would not speak to me? Do you not know that I have the authority to release you and authority to crucify you?" And Jesus answered Pilate and said, "You would have no authority over me unless it had been given to you from above. Therefore, he who delivered me over to you has the greater sin." From then on, Pilate sought to release him, but the Jews cried out, "If you release this man, you are not Caesar's friend. Everyone who makes himself a king opposes Caesar.
What is it this man did to you? I have found him guilty of nothing.
Crucify.
He is not revolutionary.
Crucify.
He is no prophet. He is a danger to no one.
Crucify.
I have even given you Barabbas.
Crucify. Crucify.
What has this man done?
Crucify. Crucify.
Fine, I will whip him. I will persecute him and beat him. Will that satisfy you? What has he done?
Crucify. Crucify.
There is no need to crucify him.
Crucify.
What has he done?
Crucify.
Fine, he is yours.
Crucify.
I wash my hands of his blood. This is not my doing. You take responsibility for his death.
I crucified Jesus. It's what the crowd wanted, and that's what they got. And personally, I don't feel like that man did anything to deserve that, but I was just a soldier doing my job. When the governor gave his sentence, that's when I would go to work. I loved that job. I felt like I was administering justice every time I nailed someone to a tree. But that man didn't deserve that. Didn't make sense to me.
It makes no sense. There I was, rotting in a jail cell for stealing, murdering. You name it, I've done it. And I knew the next time I stepped foot outside that jail cell, well, and that was it. So the guards, they came and got me, and they put me beside this guy that was beaten to a pulp. Then Governor Pilate started asking the crowd, which one of these men do you want me to set free? I mean, it was obvious. I mean, the crowd, they're going to say, let Jesus go. And then I was going to tell them where they could go. And then the crowd, they started chanting Barabbas. I mean, they were saying my name. They were saying my name over and over and over again. The guards, they threw me to the crowd, and they took Jesus to Golgotha. I mean, one minute I am a man marked for death, and then the next I'm free. It made no sense. So I followed him all the way to Golgotha.
I was stationed at Golgotha that day. We just raised the second criminal when they brought him to me. I'll never forget the way he looked. He'd been beaten, spit on, whipped. He was unrecognizable as a man. Hideous. What was left of his clothes were stripped off of him, and he was thrown down on the cross. That's when I went to work. Generally, when you crucify a man, the first hand is the most difficult. The criminal wants to get away, he fights you. So I would have 2 soldiers hold him down, but this guy, he didn't put up a fight. I just thought he was exhausted. As an executioner, I've been called every name in the book. I've had men yell at me, plead with me. But I wasn't prepared for that. He looked at us, He looked at me. And he said, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. He forgave me.
Forgive them. He said, forgive them. Who is he? Forgive. It should have been me up there. I was the one that was supposed to be hanging on that cross. He took my place. Then I looked up, and I remember he took a deep, agonizing breath, and he said, "It is finished." And then he died.
Surely, this man was the Son of God.
My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far away when I groan for help? Every day I call to you, my God, but you do not answer. Every night I lift my voice, but I find no relief. Yet you are holy, enthroned on the praises of Israel. Our ancestors trusted in you, and you rescued them. They cried out to you and were saved. They trusted in you and were never disgraced. But I am a worm and not a man. I am scorned and despised by all. Everyone who sees me mocks me. They sneer and they shake their heads, saying, "Is this the one who relies on the Lord? Then let the Lord save him. If the Lord loves him so much, let the Lord rescue him."
How deep the Father's love for us. How vast beyond all measure. That he should give his only Son to make a wretch his treasure. How great the pain of searing loss. The Father turns his face away as wounds which mar the chosen one bring many sons to glory. Behold the man upon a cross, my sin upon his shoulders.
23, verses 33 through 46. When they came to the place called the Skull, they nailed him to the cross, and the criminals were also crucified, one on his right and one on his left. Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And the soldiers gambled for his clothes by throwing dice. The crowd watched, and the leaders scoffed. "He saved others," they said. "Let him save himself if he really thinks that he is the Messiah, the chosen one." Soldiers mocked him too by offering him a drink of sour wine. They called out to him, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." A sign was fastened above him with these words, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals hanging beside him scoffed, "So you're the Messiah, are you? Prove it by saving yourself and us too while you're at it." But the other criminal protested, "Don't you fear God, even when you have been sentenced to die? We deserve to die for our crimes, but this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus replied, "I assure you, today you will be with me in paradise." By this time it was about noon, and darkness fell across the whole land until 3 o'clock. The light from the sun was gone, and suddenly the curtain in the sanctuary of the temple was torn down the middle. Then Jesus shouted, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." And those were the last words that he breathed.
paid in full by the precious blood that my Jesus spilled. Now the curse of sin has no hold on me. Whom the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. Now my debt is paid, it is paid in full by the precious blood that my Jesus
28 says, "Now after the Sabbath, toward the dawn of the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to the tomb. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the tomb and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning and clothes white as snow. For fear of him, the guards trembled and became like dead men. But the angel said to the women, 'Do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he has risen.
See, the stone is rolled away. Behold the empty tomb. Hallelujah, God be praised. He's risen from the grave. Oh, that rugged cross, my salvation, where your love poured out over me. Now my soul cries out, hallelujah, praise and honor unto thee. Praise and honor unto thee. Praise and honor unto thee.
The cross. It was meant to horrify the world. It was meant for humiliation. It was meant to last for days. It was meant for slow asphyxiation. It was meant to prolong torture. It was the Roman soldier's job. It was meant to be used by Caesar, but instead, it was used by God. It was meant to stop a movement, but instead, it became the way. It was meant to act on fear, but instead, it awakened faith. It was meant to be vicious and violent, but instead, it became our peace. It was meant to uproot hope, but instead, it became the seed. It was meant to punish captives, but instead, it unleashed freedom. It was meant to build up Rome, but instead, it built God's kingdom. It was meant to discourage rebels. It was meant to stop insurrection. It was meant to put down Jesus, but instead, it set up his resurrection. It was meant to jeer and mock him, but instead it was his glory. It was meant to erase a chapter, but instead it became the story. It was meant to hold up convicts, but instead it raised up a king. It was meant to shut our mouth, but instead it's why we sing. It was meant to be a judgment, but instead it became our mercy. It's why the song of heaven is the Lamb is worthy. It was meant to kill an enemy, crush dissenters and diversion, but instead it became the banner of God's love for every person. It was meant to be appalling, nailing hands and feet to wood. It was meant to be used for evil, but instead it was used for good. It was meant to be a symbol of God's assassination, but instead, it became the symbol of Jesus' invitation. Come to the cross. Instead of sin and stain, you are meant to be made clean. Instead of being forgotten, you are meant to know you're seen. Instead of being ashamed, you can leave behind your guilt. Instead of feeling empty, you were meant to be fulfilled. Instead of being broken, you are meant to be made whole. Here, Calvary is calling. It beckons you. Behold, come to the cross. Instead of being an accident, you have a purpose and a plan. Instead of being abandoned, you were chosen by His hand. For all who've said I can't, God has said I can. No matter what you've done, the invitation stands. Come to the cross. Instead of being doubtful, you are meant to know your Father. You are meant to be His son, and you are meant to be His daughter. You were cherished from the start. You were always in the picture. Instead of being a victim, you were meant to be a victor. The result of Jesus' blood, salvation has arrived. Instead of being dead, you are meant to be alive. The cross. It was meant to signal death, but instead, it's a sign of living. It was meant to be the end, but instead, it's our beginning.
Is crowned with glory now. The Savior knelt to wash our feet. Now at His feet we bow. The one who wore our sin and shame, now robed in majesty, the radiance of perfect love now shines for all to see.
Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. The fear that had us now gives way to Him who is our peace. His final breath upon the cross is now alive in me. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our
By your Spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me, In your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. By your Spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King. Can we sing this out? By your Spirit.
By your Spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King is resurrecting
Tomb where soldiers watched in vain was borrowed for 3 days. His body there would not remain. Our God has robbed the grave.
Our God has robbed the
Sing out your name.
Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. Your name is victory. All praise will rise to Christ our King. By your Spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. By your Spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. By your Spirit I will rise from the ashes of defeat. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. In your name I come alive to declare your victory. The resurrected King is resurrecting me. He's resurrecting me. Our God is
Jesus, we're so grateful for this week that we can just celebrate your death, but not just that, your resurrection. And God, I pray that for these students and these leaders in this room, that if anyone has not taken that next step and said yes to you, to following you, God, I pray that you would just turn their hearts towards you, that you will soften their hearts for the gospel. And God, it's my prayer that as we just continue to remember those events that happened 2,000 years ago, that you'll just break our hearts for what you did for us, what you did for us on the cross. And God, I pray that we can just celebrate what you did for us with the empty tomb. Jesus, thank you so much that you loved us, the world, so much that you gave your only Son, that whoever believes in him, puts their trust in you, Jesus, will have everlasting life. We love you, Jesus, and we pray this all in your name. Amen. Hey, before you guys head to your community groups, I just want to let you know about two things. One is this Friday, we're having a Good Friday service here at 6:30? 6:30. And we would love for you guys to come back as we just continue to look at the cross and what Jesus did for us. And then we also, I know a lot of you guys don't attend here on the weekends, but we would love to have you come and worship with us this weekend as we celebrate Easter. But I love you guys. You're free to head to your community groups. If you're new, I know we have some new people here. Welcome. If you don't know where to go at this point, you can come down here and find me, and we can find your group. But I hope you guys have a great rest of the week. Love you guys.